All righty. Well, again, good morning to those of you on the West Coast, where I'm coming from not so sunny but cloudy Oakland, California, here in the northern part of the state. We're excited for today's live winter webinar session. And this has been a series that has been brought to you by KRA Corporation. And believe it or not, this is our fifth and final session of the series. We started this in the early part of December. Really, our goal in this webinar series was to provide valuable content that we believe could be impactful for the workforce development community. Typically, the winter is when you really don't see a lot of workforce conferences within our industry. And so it was a great opportunity to fill that time with some meaningful, impactful topics that are near and dear to our heart and that we've had an opportunity to either share or will be sharing with the workforce community, either in the previous season of workforce conferences and also some of the upcoming conferences that are taking place throughout the year. And so today's session is something that is near and dear to my heart. My name is Jonathan Overall. I am the Director of Communications with KRA and also leading our innovation. My story in workforce development started off over 11 years ago. And today I found myself having worked a number of different roles within the company and now leading our communications effort. So we'll give a formal introduction here in just a moment, but again, want to welcome all of you to today's session, our fifth and final within the KRA Winter Webinar Series. And at the end of today, we're going to encourage you and give some next steps in how you can stay in contact with us. We want to use these sessions as a way to provide information that is both transformational and inspiring, but also get to know you and to connect with you in other ways to continue to provide value. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, my name is Jonathan Overall, the Director of Communications and Innovation at KRA. What I do in my role on a daily basis is to help provide the strategic approach in our communications efforts. Our communications team is made up of several members that are contributors. And today I'm going to be joined by Carlos, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself in just a moment. But we also have Ryan Rand, who's here, who works in our people and culture department, who also is a contributor to our communications team. Marcy Dingle, who is also a communications manager within KRA. And we have a dynamic team that brings a lot of great skill sets to bear and in helping to carry out the vision strategically of our communications and marketing across different platforms. And that is something that has definitely evolved over the last decade or so, especially in business. The prevalence of using social media, websites, and now we have the evolution of AI, which is changing the landscape of really every part of our industry, but especially in the area of communications as well. So I'm excited and also honored to be able to be a part of such an amazing team. And today it'll be Carlos and I that will be presenting our topic. And so at this time, I'd like to hand it off to Carlos so that he can introduce himself to you all.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to session 5 of our live winter webinar session. My name is Carlos Galle, and I am a digital marketing consultant for KRA, supporting the marketing, communication, and innovation initiatives for KRA Corporation. And I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you, Carlos. And so I just want to set at the top, and before we talk about the agenda, just the importance of today's conversation. Every one of us has a story. Your story as an individual, perhaps your career, your journey to this point in workforce development, human services, whatever part of the industry that you find yourself in. But you also have a story of what you encounter on a daily basis in those that you serve and in those that you provide solutions to in the local community. And so as we talk about today's topic, I want you to think of it through that lens. We're going to talk both at the organizational level at the program level, and then also at the day-to-day level for those of you that might be serving job seekers directly or businesses directly. I want you to think through your customers, their journey, your interaction with them, and how you might be able to tell that story in an amplified way. And so here's the agenda. These are some of the areas that we're going to talk about. Number one, amplifying workforce impact through digital brand storytelling. And again, those are probably terms that you are familiar with. Our role in workforce development doesn't just end with the services that we provide. And so we want to talk about how we can carry through that impact and be ambassadors and storytellers in the work that we do. We're also going to talk about why storytelling matters in workforce development, specific to the background, the backdrop of what is taking place in our industry. Why is there urgency? Why does this topic even matter? Then we're going to talk about storytelling, the storytelling framework, and some things that we do internally and that you can perhaps adopt on your own as well. A framework, a way of approaching this work of communications and storytelling. Then we're going to talk some specifics on what it looks like to see digital brand storytelling in practice. What are some of the strategies that you can apply? What are some of the things that you can walk away with? And maybe it's similar to what you're already doing. And from our perspective, hopefully that adds some additional insight as well. Then we're going to have give you the opportunity interactively to think through perhaps your work, your organization, the impact that you currently have, and think through your own version of telling your story, and give you the opportunity to share that as well on an interactive basis. And then we'll allow for some Q&A at the end as well. And I also want to tell you, make sure you stay until the end. Now, this is a 90-minute webinar, and we want everyone to stay until the end because we actually have a raffle prize. And that raffle prize, that giveaway, will be the names of the individuals that are still on at that time. So make sure you stay on until the end, and we'll be sure to include your name as with an opportunity, a chance to win a prize at the very end. At this time, again, as I mentioned earlier, to those of you that joined at the very beginning, be sure to include your where you're joining us from, your organization, your role. But we do have a poll, a very brief poll. This is 3 questions. And so I'm going to ask Ryan to bring our poll up now that we have completed the agenda. And so we're going to have really 3 questions designed to hear from you. Your a little bit about your role. What are some of the needs or challenges that you're seeing related to this topic? And perhaps what are some of the things that you would be, that you're looking forward to and that you would like to walk away with from today's webinar? So I can't see it on my end, but I trust that you should be able to see the poll by now, and you should be able to click through the responses, and then we'll give a few moments here for you to read through each one, provide your response, and then we'll kind of get a temperature check of who's in the room, what are some trending topics of interest based on what we're going to talk about today, and perhaps what are some of the needs, what are some of the challenges that you find, and these sessions are meant to spark interest around the topic. And as I mentioned earlier, we're here as practitioners doing the work, and we're open to learn and hear, share ideas, share experiences. And one thing I've found in workforce development is that not one issue or challenge is isolating, and that there are others within the community, the village of workforce professionals who have probably experienced the same challenge that you have. And much of what we're sharing today comes from lessons learned, experiences that we've had in this area of communications, and the practice that we bring. And part of one of the driving core principles here at KRA that also leads our communications effort is continuous quality improvement. that we realize that when we launch a campaign, a new method, a new practice, a new strategy, a new plan, that it's not going to be perfect the first time. But over time, we can continue to refine that, revisit. And so that's really part of the framework of our team as well. And so what we share today is going to come from that perspective. Ryan, how are we doing on the polls thus far? I can't see it on my side.
Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go.
Okay, good. I have a little too many Teams windows up, I think. We are doing good. I think we should give another minute for responses to keep coming in. But so far, it looks like the majority of our respondents are somewhat confident about telling their story. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So like I said, the first two should still be available. I see a comment in the chat. If you aren't able to see the poll pop up on your screen, go ahead and open the chat and scroll up. They should be in the chat as well with buttons to submit your vote for each if the pop-up for some reason might have gone away. But again, it looks like most participants are somewhat confident in their storytelling. Biggest challenges, the highest most popular responses so far are a lack of time or capacity and difficulty translating outcomes for different audiences. Coming up second highest to those is unclear messaging or brand identity and digital marketing or marketing enterprise. And looks like most people are most interested in learning how to tailor stories for different audiences. Second response to that would be digital tools and best practices for visibility and engagement.
Awesome.
So if you haven't responded to those yet, again, they should still be up in the chat if the pop-up isn't available on your screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan, and thank you everyone who has thus far put your responses in the poll. And again, we'll maybe at the end go through our final results to get a pulse on where you all are. But I believe, just on what I heard thus far, and I'm sure Carlos can attest that, our presentation today will address really closely your responses and what you're looking for and some of the needs. And again, it will be tailored. I know we may have some in the audience that might not directly be in workforce development, but in human services, community-based organization, nonprofit, and generally a lot of the principles that we'll be talking about can be applied in any setting that I just mentioned. And so we'll move forward and introduce really the first section of our presentation today, which is the urgency, the impetus of amplifying workforce impact through digital brand storytelling. Now, and first of all, I want to, again, go back to the definition of what a company brand is or an organization brand is, and that is the perception that people have about your organization. And that is not just entirely what the company is about itself, but what do your clients, what do your partners, what do the employers that work with you, what do they feel, what do they expect, and what do they remember when they see your logo, your organization? What feeling do they have? And I'm sure if I went through a list of different elements that we interact with on a daily basis, we would speak to personally how we see brands in culture. We just came off of the Super Bowl a couple of days ago. Companies willing to spend, I think this year, $8 million for a 30-second slot, building on the equity of their brand. And when I think about some of the more notable brands in our society, I think of Coca-Cola, I think of McDonald's. As soon as I see those golden arches, I have memories of that brand image from the time that I was a kid, whether it was the Kid Zone, the Happy Meal. Those golden arches represent a feeling, an expectation of the experience that I'm going to have when I go to McDonald's. And that has lived with me for most of my life, from the time that I can remember going to McDonald's the first time. And so that's the power and the impact of a company's brand. And so as we think about who we are as an organization, what does our brand, what story does it tell? What do people think of in the community when they see our logo, when they see our organization represented? Even going beyond that, when they see the members of our team and who represents our organization, what does our brand represent? What do people feel and expect when they come in contact with our organization? So as we talk about brand, that's where we're coming from. But what we're going to discuss with brand is the digital element as well. Because in today's day and age, we have printed material, the flyers, the brochures, but really the amplification of our voice is in the digital medium. So we're going to tailor what we talk about today in that regard. Now, as a company, we use video, we use visual through email. We also have a podcast. I'm the host of KRA's The Hub podcast. We have the digital medium. And so again, a lot of what we share and tell is going to be through that lens and in telling the story. But let's talk about the moment that we're in, because in workforce development, we really are at a crossroads. And if you're in the workforce industry, you know this. There is a time of political uncertainty. So much has changed in a short amount of time. And you read the headlines, and the headlines can lead you in one direction of feeling uncertain, feeling anxious about the future or even about the present. There are shifting funding priorities. We know that there is a greater alignment between the Department of Labor, the Department of Education and Commerce, and that's going to impact the future. Now, one thing we know is that within the recent legislative actions, that it looks like the workforce, WIOA, will not be impacted as much going into this next year. But again, we're seeing that in the future years, there could be, with the shifting funding priorities, different legislative action taken that would change the landscape. And so that brings uncertainty. That can bring a certain amount of anxiety. We also have economic volatility. One day the stock market is up, one day it's down. We know that the stock market is not the only indicator of how well our economy is doing, but we also see rapid transition of employment, people moving from one industry to another or one occupation to another. We see that the evolution of remote work, digital workplaces. AI is revolutionizing the way that people work and the way that roles are actually carried out on a daily basis. So all of these things are changing with technology. We also have growing public skepticism of institutions. We see, unfortunately, in the headlines, stories of fraud, stories of government and public institutions not being able to live up to the speed of expectations like we see in private business. Last year, or even earlier in this recent administration, an emphasis on efficiency with DOGE, and we know that created a ripple effect in the governmental jobs and the governmental sectors. And so all of this is part of the backdrop of what we are facing and what we have the opportunity to rise to the challenge within our industry because of all of the things that are going on. So there's a lot of things that are out of our control. And that's really where anxiousness, uncertainty comes from, is what's out of our control. But one thing that is in our control is our narrative. It's the ability that we have to tell our story, the story of our industry, the story of the work that we're doing, and the story of that impact. And so if I could inspire you with anything at the beginning, is to see today's topic through that we have the ability to control that narrative and to influence and to amplify the message of the work that we're doing. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Carlos.
Thanks, Jonathan. So the point here is simple. There's a story gap. On one side, you and your teams change lives daily with measurable and meaningful outcomes. You have the numbers to prove it. Yet on the other side, the public narrative is often inconsistent, fragmented, often written about us, but not by us. So this is where we have the opportunity to own the message, because if we don't have control of that message, what others hear and perceive may often be misunderstood. Next. All right, so let's define what storytelling is and isn't. Storytelling isn't marketing fluff. Storytelling is actually a tool for building trust, building meaning, and translating our impact into terms we all understand. Storytelling is not a spin, exaggeration, or self-promotion without substance. And something that I'd like for us to understand as well is storytelling is how you help people understand your work without needing to share a full report for them to understand it. Next.
All right, we're going to talk about why storytelling matters in workforce development. I talked just a few minutes ago on the backdrop of what we're facing within this industry, but let's talk about why this matters in the industry that we work in. Well, stories are what move people. Now, we all know that we have reports, we have contracts, we have a scope of work that we're operating within, and simple fact is that the action behind that, the results, are what keep us in business. We have to perform. We have to demonstrate the data. I don't know about you, but if I see too many numbers and too much data, my eyes can gloss over, and I'm not really connecting the dots. And so when it comes to communication, when it comes to us amplifying our voice, it's important that we give the story that the data tells. And we help fill in the blanks. We help to add the color and the animation from the data to help really share stories that inspire action. And so what does data do? Well, it proves credibility. Simply put, we can have the great marketing, we can have the great flashy branding and be very clever, but if we don't do the work, then really, what does it matter? There's no founding, no grounding to that. And so data does prove credibility, and so that's important. We have to do the work, we have to do it well and with excellence. But then on top of that, stories truly create emotional connections. Now, this is something that in the field of psychology, there's a term called neurocoupling. And again, this is through the art of storytelling. Perhaps you can think of a great communicator, somebody who inspired you, and perhaps they were probably really great at painting a picture, painting a picture and an image with a story. And at the psychological level, through the study of the field of neurocoupling, it's been proven that a listener, somebody who hears a story from someone who's speaking, actually connects deeply and emotionally with the speaker who is presenting. And that can be through, again, the oral presentation of a story, but also through the written version of a story, that there is a deep human connection that we make to stories. And why? Because they're personal, because they're authentic. And so as we add to the work that we're doing, the data, the numbers, the impact, the different individuals, the element of the human story, it drives a much deeper connection. And that, in a sense, will help build the brand, the recognition of our organizations, but also how people feel about the work that we do. And again, this is integrated in a world where we are dealing with policy, we're dealing with funding, and again, we have to live at the intersection of both. And it's with the marrying of those two things, storytelling and and to translate the policy and the funding and the work that we're doing to make the greatest impact. And so again, stories don't replace data, but they truly help to carry data and to amplify the message. So as we talk about workforce, we realize that we all work in a world of programs. Every program that we support or work through has a purpose. It has a designed end in mind to bring impact to the communities that we serve. However, we live in that world. But to those on the outside that are listening to the stories being told, our language that we speak to internally does not translate to them. And so as we're communicating through our marketing and our communications, and somebody brought this up earlier, this was one of the polling questions, the need to tailor our message. Well, before we can tailor our message, we have to then think through, how do we translate what we do to those in the outside world? Now, if you're in WIOA or TANF or other human services or aspects of workforce development, you know that there are a lot of acronyms. OJT, ITA, CT, that's the language that we speak. That's the language of services. But as we translate what we do impactfully to amplify to the outside world, we have to speak through the solutions of what we offer. The efforts and the activities, they lead to an outcome, but we have to speak to the solutions that they provide, and not just merely the word or the service that it is, but the solution that it offers to the customers that we serve. We have to move and shift our language from compliance to community impact. How is the work that we're doing showing up in the communities? How do our communities look different today than they did yesterday? It's moving from transaction to transformation. The customers that we serve is not a transactional dynamic, but it's a relational one. Whether it's a job seeker, a business, a community partnership, it's not just a transactional one, what I can do for you, what you can do for me, but that it has the goal in mind of transformation. And when we amplify and tell the story, we're telling it from those three areas: the solutions, the community impact, and the transformation that it's having in the communities that we're serving in.
And as we think about the story we need to tell, it's important for us to keep in mind that your mission stays the same, but the message has to pivot based on who's listening. So here we have primary audiences. We have job seekers, employers, policymakers, funders, community partners, and internal staff. The mission stays the same, but the angle changes. So that is a different lens, or the message, the angle that we need to find for the audience, for us to communicate that and help the audience see our value. Next. So let's think about a single job placement. A job seeker sees stability, but an employer sees a talent pipeline. A policymaker looks for ROI, while a funder wants results that match their goals. And your staff needs purpose. I think that we all want to share the great work that we do and feel proud of it. So that's one outcome, but here we have 5 different narratives. Next.
All right. Building off of that, as Carlos talked about the audiences and thinking through the lens of who we're speaking to, it's so important because the ability to connect with an audience starts there. It's us putting ourselves in their shoe. And then the next step from that progressively is the storytelling framework. Now, to set this up, I want you to think through genres of film. There's different types of genres. One of my favorite is a good action movie. Now, my wife is different. She likes the romantic comedy or the romantic story. Now, I could go back decades, and the action movies of the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, the 80s when I was growing up, the 90s, they're almost the same. Now, they've changed because technology and the sequences and the ability to tell that story has enhanced over time. But the same basic elements of telling that story of an action movie has remained the same. The same thing for the romantic comedies. Now, again, I like a certain genre of action film. My wife likes the Hallmark Channel. and the Christmas Hallmark movies. And I joke all the time that every movie is the same, basically the same plot, but with different characters and different people. It starts off with somebody from the big city coming to the small town, and I'm sure all of you can connect with it. But what they do in that genre of storytelling, it's a framework. Same elements, but with different characters, a different setting, but they're using the framework to tell their story. And so as we talk about storytelling frameworks in workforce development and within your organization, I want you to think of it through that lens. And let's talk about what kind of foundation that lays. It lays a foundation of authenticity. And authenticity in our world today is of the utmost of importance. As I mentioned earlier, with the rise of AI, with the rise of technology, the one thing about digital media is that it's very efficient. You can amplify a message. Anyone can have a platform, but there can also be overload. People can be overwhelmed by the options that they have with digital media. They can be overwhelmed with short attention spans, and so we have to capture their attention. But the one thing that remains true is authenticity, the simplicity of real life stories. And that's why people connect with reality TV shows. That's why people connect most with social media influencers who bring them into the authenticity and the simplicity of their life. And so as we talk about frameworks, one of the key driving elements of a communications framework is seeking to deliver the content that we provide with an authentic voice. But as we look at our frameworks, they have to be strategic. And in speaking from our experiences internally as a company, one thing that we've done over the last year is really seek to establish strategic frameworks in how we communicate. And what does that do? Well, it helps to lead to purposeful messaging. Also, it leads to clear messaging standards and consistent messaging across all channels. And so one thing we've done specifically is develop specific communication frameworks. We're going to talk about what some of those frameworks can look like, but across different types of elements that we're communicating, whether it's an event, whether it's a customer testimonial, whether it's a story on a business or a job seeker, that we have frameworks that are created so that we ensure that our messaging is purposeful with intention, that our messaging is clear, and that we have a standard, and that over time that our messaging has a standard that remains true throughout the different eras, the different seasons through which we're communicating. And then lastly, that it's consistent across all channels. And KRA as an organization, we operate programs in different states around the country. We offer programs in WIOA, TANF, and other specialized services throughout the country. And so our frameworks allow us to tell our story, whether it's WIOA, TANF, or a special project, with meaning behind it, clear messaging standards, and consistency in the way that we tell that story, no matter what. Now, strong workforce stories, they incorporate the ingredients of honesty. Again, that builds back the authenticity, the honesty, the connection to reality of the work that we're doing. They're grounded in lived experience, both the lived experience of the work that we do as practitioners, but also connecting that to the lived experience of our customers, telling the real life story. And Carlos is going to talk about some of the elements of some real life examples of what that looks like, the lived experiences that you and I can truly connect with, that puts flesh on the practices and the work that we do. Also, ensuring that they're specific and not inflated. You lose authenticity if you try to inflate, if you try to oversell, over amplify something that's not truly grounded in reality. And so again, that goes back to ensuring that everything that we share, everything that we tell is aligned with the actual outcomes, not the income, the actual outcomes of the work that we're doing. So here's a simple example of a workforce story arc. And again, you can apply this If your industry is slightly out of workforce development, you can adjust this, but this is a principle, a framework that has worked for us and that you can apply. But a practical framework begins with the challenge. And again, if you're serving a job seeker, the challenge is unemployment. The challenge could be a skills gap. The challenge could be childcare, could be transportation, whatever the story began with the person that you served. For a business, it could be the need to downsize. It could be the economic impact for that industry. That's the challenge. And that's the point that we interact with our customer and that we come into their story, is to listen, to understand their challenge, and then to bring a solution. And so our story should begin with sharing what was that challenge that we encountered with that customer. Next, through the natural progression of our relationship with that customer, that interaction leads to an intervention. That's where our services become solutions. The intervention, what were we able to offer? That training, that job fair, that on-the-job training subsidy for the employer. Perhaps it was a customized training cohort that we were able to design for the business, for the business owner or the industry that we were working with at that time. That was the intervention. That was our opportunity to present a solution that would ultimately lead towards the transformation. Those are the results. That is the job placement for the single mom who was struggling with transportation and struggling with going back to school and managing all of these things. The supportive services that we were able to offer, the transformation that led to a sustainable job. The business that is no longer struggling with retention, struggling finding talent. The transformation were the services and the solutions that we were able to provide, and ultimately the impact that it had for that customer. And then lastly, what is the broader impact? As we look up close, we can see the challenges, the intervention, and the transformation. But as we zoom out with the stories that we're telling, we can then see the broader impact. How is this at large at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, at the end of a program? How is that bringing real life change and broader impact to the neighborhoods and the communities that we serve? As we zoom out, we should be able to see that and share what that looks like. And this is really the impact that goes to the advocacy that we can have at the city council level, at the board level, ultimately to the federal level and to the state level, so that we can share the broader impact of every new job. What is that doing to the tax base in our local community? What is the return on investment of the dollars that are being spent by the Department of Labor, by the state, and by the local workforce board? That is where we really get to a dynamic of sharing the broader impact that moves the heart, that moves the connection to those that are in a decision-making position that are funding the work that we do. And so I want you to think about it. Your framework. What is the framework of your organization when it comes to telling the stories of the work that you're doing? Think through, what are the challenges, the interventions, the transformation, and the broader impact that you're having? That's the framework. That's the foundation of telling your story to those in your community. And just like an elevator pitch, it's great to be able to share that in a concise way, in a very clear way, 60 seconds or less. And so I want you to take some time, take a moment to think about that reflectively as we move on in today's presentation.
And once we have the story arc, what are the core narrative elements that we need to have to create an impact story? We need a character and a setting to anchor the story. We need conflict and action to show a solution, and an outcome and a meaning to explain why it matters. This is really the opportunity we're creating to give our audience a reason to care. Now, I know everything sounds very nice, but how does it look like in practice? And that's what we're going to look at in the next slide. All right, so let's start creating a story and see the differences here. A program description says, Our program provides career services to participants. A story says, when Maria lost her job, she thought stability was out of reach. Do we see the difference here? I think the message here is to turn program language into something we can all understand. And the reality is that we all have a story to share. And that's exactly what I have on the next slide, with an actual story that our colleague, Thomas Thornton, which I know you're here, Thomas, so credit to you for sharing this story. We have a story from Pam, Ohio Means Jobs, Summit County. And this is how the story, this is the story. Pam came to Ohio Means Jobs, Summit County during a major disruption after Joann Fabrics, her longtime employer, announced its bankruptcy and nationwide closures. Determined to move forward, Pam made the decision to attend every job fair we hosted, stayed engaged, and approached her job search with purpose. Along the way, she received resume support from our team, mock interviews that helped rebuild her confidence, and ongoing encouragement. That consistency paid off. Pam received 2 strong offers and recently accepted a role as an admin contractor at Huntington Bank, placed through Tech Systems. Now, when situations feel uncertain, showing up and staying open to support can lead to something better. So none of us know Pam. Well, Thomas, you know Pam, but here we have an example of a story where we immediately know the character, the setting, conflict and action, and we know the outcome and the meaning. Now, let's take another a look at the next slide to talk about why theme matters. And themes are really the key points that help us connect the values we all share, right? So I think we need to think about, what is this story really about? Is it about dignity of work? Is it about second chances? Is it about economic mobility or resilience? Is it about community strength? So these themes that we see here, pride, self-worth, redemption, a way back, success, progress, persistence, grit, stability, and connection, these are values we all share. And this is something that we need to think about as we start to create or plan these stories. Next. Now, I know that this starts to give a better picture of what we're talking about, and we start to see these examples and what storytelling looks like. But now let's put it to practice. And in this next slide, we have what we were talking about when we started this presentation, about bridging the gap. So storytelling is not optional. If we want to bridge the gap, we can't lose the narrative. We need to stay visible. Digital is really where narratives form today. Silence creates space for misinterpretation. This is what we tend to see from public perception. And visibility builds trust before a meeting ever happens. So a lot of times we may post something, we may send out an email and have a team member meet with someone we don't know. But when we meet with them, they mention, oh, I read your success story through your newsletter, or I saw your success story through your LinkedIn post. It is these opportunities that really give us time to pause and really see the impact that you start to create when you start to hear comments like this. Now, your digital brand is already speaking, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next slide. So whether you control it or not, your audience is already engaging with you through multiple touch points. It could be your personal LinkedIn page. It could be your website. It could be a social media post, news coverages, presentations, newsletters, emails, or even public meetings. The one thing that we need to ask ourselves is our message consistent across these channels? And how do we decide what to show whenever we're sharing a story? Let's look at one example in the next slide. So what to show, not just say. Some of the high impact content types that we see across some of the stories that we share through articles, newsletters, and even social media posts is implementing a visual first approach. How do we do this? By sharing photos. Short videos are the most powerful types of content that we see that tend to resonate with our target audiences. Things that resonate well as well are participant success snapshots, employer partnerships, staff expertise moments, community events, and even behind the scenes impact. A lot of work goes behind creating an event. So acknowledging that process is also part of the story. Let's take a look at the next slide. And here, we'll take a look at a few examples of some of the photos that we share. Here's the story with Pam, another story with Majesty from Rancho Dominguez, and another one from Ricky. So in all of these stories, we follow the framework that Jonathan and I talked about earlier. And this is something that resonates really well and helps people understand the work that we do. Next.
Thank you, Carlos. And I think it's really great to see the visual element of how we carry out the digital element of communication in practice. And even building off of what we shared earlier, and what Carlos just shared on the importance of what we tell visually, and being really being aware of all of the different elements and with intentionality, and that helps to really shape our strategy of what we're doing. Going back to one of the comments that came up earlier in our poll, and it sounded like a need or a desire out of this session was tailoring to our audience. And that's something that, as we just walk through the series of slides, really keeping the audience in mind, building off of the foundation of how stories connect at the human level. And that's the foundation, the authenticity, the framework through which we tell. But some examples of how we have tailored our communication to an audience is keeping who our primary target is in mind. And that may be different across our website, our newsletter, perhaps our podcast, our other digital media that's on social media, ensuring that at every level that we're reaching the diversity of our audience, that everyone, whether they're an executive with another organization, a potential client that we may do business with, a job seeker who may come across our LinkedIn page or a website, that at every level, we ask ourselves as a team, we put ourselves in the shoes of those people in our audience that we're looking to reach and ask ourselves, does this clearly express who we are at that level? If I'm a potential client that would want to do business with KRA, does this clearly present to them who we are as an organization? If a job seeker comes across our website, does our messaging, does our tone really speak to who they are? If a business that we might do business with and actually provide services to, and we owe or TANF or a job placement, does our website, does what we communicate truly speak to them who we are at the level that we would interact with them as a customer? And so we ask ourselves that question and seek to tailor the language of the content that we produce with that voice in mind, realizing, again, as we said earlier, that language matters. And we have to translate the language of workforce, the inner workings of what we do, to an audience that is on the outside. And so now, with all of that being said, we're going to do as interactive as we can here on Microsoft Teams. But really, this is more of a interactive, reflective activity, and feel free to engage in the chat as well, as we talk through this activity. But I want you to think about your 60-second impact story. We planted the seed earlier, and we correlated this with your elevator pitch. If you were on the elevator with somebody, and you probably have done this before, and you had to share who you are, what you do, and what organization you're with, you could probably do that in 60 seconds. But I want you to think, if you were to tell an impact story in 60 seconds about your organization, related to your organization. Perhaps it was a person, a job seeker that you served, or an employer that you've met with, that you've served, and that you've seen the transformational impact, somebody that's been helped by your organization. I want you to think, what challenge did they face? What changed because of the work, the solution that you were able to provide? We called it earlier the intervention. What was that? And then finally, number 3, why does it matter beyond them? If you think about the community, the industry that we work in, as we mentioned earlier, the backdrop is that there's an urgency right now for us to be able to share our message to decision makers, those that are funding the work that we do, to amplify our voice and be advocates of the work that we do. Why does it matter beyond just them? So again, with these 3 questions in mind, I want you to begin to formulate and to think of, if you have some note paper alongside of you right there, just begin to jot down some of your thoughts, your individual reflections. What would be some of those themes? And if it comes to mind immediately, feel free to enter that into the chat. Take a moment to think about it. Think about the arc of the storytelling process, as we shared earlier, the challenge, the intervention, the transformation, the broader impact. And I liked what Carlos described earlier, the character. Every great movie, every great story has a character. Every great movie story has a setting. There's always some type of conflict. There's always an action, something that takes place to change the results. Then there's the outcome. And then the meaning. Why does it truly matter? And so as Carlos walked us through that as being the anchor of our story, the show or the demonstration of the solution, and our explanation of why it matters, I want you to think of those like ingredients that are going in to your story. And just like your favorite recipe or favorite food, it has a series of ingredients that make it come to life. And so as we think about the storytelling element of the work that we do, think about those ingredients. Make them personal, make them relevant, make them authentic, and bring that story to life. And so as you're doing this as an individual reflection, jotting down what that looks like, feel free to share some themes in the chat with the community here in this webinar. All right, as a debrief, what are some of the things that you noticed in thinking through that? And hopefully you had a chance to think of an instance, a story of a person or an organization that you've worked with. What made that story or those stories compelling? What were some of the elements that you experienced it? Maybe it was a lived experience. Even if you were a leader or a manager or director within your organization, you can think about that story. What were some of the elements that have made that story compelling? What were the details that mattered? What were some of the elements there that made it a natural human-to-human connection? And then lastly, where did the emotion show up naturally? As we deal with people, the ebbs and flows, the mountaintop experiences, the valley experiences of life, and the circumstances that we find most of our services in, where did that natural emotion come into play? And so again, feel free to chime in the chat as you think through this arc of storytelling, of an instance, a moment, maybe something recently, maybe something in the past that connected with you. And so as we have done this here and have encouraged you to take part in this activity, I want to encourage you in your organizations to do this as a team, to think about the ways that you can incorporate this at a stronger level, to create intentionality around your storytelling and your communication strategies. All right. So I want to talk about the power of consistency. And this is something that as a team, as we talk practically about the stories that we're telling, it's very important as an organization that we plan out a calendar, a schedule that is consistent with the monthly themes. And when I say monthly themes, I'm talking about perhaps the themes that are unique to your industry, or the themes that we celebrate as a nation. For example, we're in the midst of Black History Month, and that's a time where our nation, where we honor and reflect on the history of Black history in our nation, some of the accomplishments, some of the key milestones in throughout Black history, throughout our nation's past, and even our present. And so, as a communications team, there are themes that are happening throughout the year that we recognize nationally, that might be recognized based on an industry. We have Manufacturing Month, we have National Workforce Development Month, we have Women's History Month, we have Mental Health Month, Mental Health Awareness Month. And so these themes are things that are taking place throughout the year that we can align with as a communications organization, and connect the dots with how our organization and the work that we're doing contributes to that conversation, contributes to the awareness of those areas. Maybe it's a story of a business or a job seeker who overcame challenges that connect with one of those themes. And so again, be aware of the monthly themes. Create your own monthly themes. Create themes that are perhaps unique to your organization. Maybe they're unique to the city or the state that you're in, the region that is personal to that area. Also think about the organizational events, the things that are planned throughout the year by your organization. As you have a calendar for your operations, for your program, you probably know a quarter or two in advance the job fairs or the community fairs, the different events that are taking place in your community that either you are planning and directing, or maybe it's an event that you're partnering with. Be mindful, be intentional with knowing the calendar, knowing the quarter or the year ahead, and planning your communications around those events. How are we going to tell the story of this event that's taking place? Also, breaking it down at a monthly level. Now, one thing we do have a monthly newsletter internally with KRA, and we map out months in advance the different themes, the monthly themes, the organizational themes that are taking place, things that are happening within our industry that we should be mindful of, so that we're not caught off guard, or we're not responding in a short amount of time, but that we have time to think intentionally throughout the year of what's coming up. How can we intentionally interact and share the story in the way that our organization is interacting with this? And we do this on a monthly basis. And so that is part of the planning and the intentionality that goes into our newsletter. And then we have also weekly micro stories. And this could be something that shows up on social media. Now, Carlos shared a couple of examples earlier of some of the customer testimonials, the business testimonials, and those are things that may show up in our monthly calendar, but these are things that are happening more regularly at the program level throughout our organization. And so instead of waiting for our monthly newsletter or a big quarterly update, we can share that weekly on our social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Twitter, whatever you're using for social media, can share those stories of things that are happening continuously throughout your organization. And again, we can reserve certain things for our quarterly impact. And maybe at the communication level, you may not have a newsletter that's going to the public. Maybe your newsletter is going to those that are donating to your organization. Maybe it's key stakeholders that are connected or partnered with you in the community that you're sharing a quarterly impact of. And how you tell that story, again, should be consistent, and it should be with intentionality over time. Carlos, any additional insights that you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, I think that the key detail here is that storytelling is a practice. Consistency, consistency, consistency. It is not a one-time campaign. And I think that the plan that you have here as homework for us to start thinking about monthly themes, organization events, monthly spotlight, this should give us enough ideas to start coming up with different stories to share. And that's really the key to this whole conversation, right? It is a process. It is not a one-time campaign. It is a practice. I think storytelling isn't just something for the communications team or the executive leadership team. This is something we can all do because collectively storytelling shapes perception. It builds trust. It protects funding. It inspires teams. It advances the mission we all share, but it also motivates us, our teams, and others about the work that we are all doing. Now, let's take another look at the slide. And here, let's ask ourselves, where do we start? Do we need a big budget? No. Just hit the start button. Start with one story a month, one clear message, and one shared responsibility. And that's something that will significantly speed up the process of you creating stories. Next. All right, and your call to action. So there's homework that we have for you all. Ask yourself today or ask your team tomorrow morning, what story are we telling today, this week, this month? Who needs to hear it and who owns it? Jonathan, back to you.
Thank you, Carlos. And just piggybacking and echoing what you said, it is so important that we impress in this conversation that every member of the organization has an opportunity to represent and to reflect the brand that people think of when they think about your organization, how they feel, their experiences, the memories, the quality of services that you provide at the customer level, at the partner level, and just within the industry and within the local community that you serve in. And so every person at every level, whether you're an executive that's leading the strategy and the direction of communications within your organization, if you're a manager who's overseeing staff that is trying to build that culture, that it's important that you too approach it with that intentionality. And if you're on the front lines at the level of serving the business, serving the job seeker, your voice, your experience in that situation matters. And so we want to encourage everybody at every level that you are working in on a daily basis to think of yourself as an advocate, as an ambassador to tell that story. And as we started off today's conversation, if we don't tell a story, who will? We think of maybe somebody else will tell the story, or maybe my story is not as impactful as the next, but it's all part of the tapestry of the work and the impact that we're having on a daily basis. And so as we start to bring this conversation to a close, and as Carlos gave us the call to action of thinking about what can you start with now, I really want you to also ask yourself, you think about at large, the work that you do. Does this work matter? And I know as I answer this, I could say yes. Now, there are going to be moments and times when we're challenged, moments and times like we mentioned where there's uncertainty, where there's economic instability. But that's the time. It may be a challenge, but that's the time where we have the opportunity to rise above and to be a voice, to amplify the work that we're doing. And so that's why you're here, because you do know that the work matters. And you could probably look back, if I were to put anyone on the spot, of the testimonials, the highlights, the things that breathe life into why you show up to work every day, you would probably say yes. And there's a reason why. There's people that you've interacted with or people that you seek to interact with in the work that you do, and they all have a story. And so as you start there, really animates and it brings to life this conversation today, that the stories are all around you, that they're walking through your career centers, through your organization on a daily basis. And then next, is the impact real? And I can say absolutely. When I think back to the transformation that I've seen, not just the stories that we've been able to tell through our podcast, through our newsletter, through social media, but even the work that I've done in previous times as a program manager, as a business services consultant, I can absolutely say that the impact of that work matters. And it is real. It's been authentic. And again, that's my individual story. But as an industry, if we bring our stories together, that's where we can amplify collectively that impact. Then who should tell the story? And that, again, brings back the onus on all of us, that every one of you has an opportunity to do that. And so let's be those in our industry that define our narrative. Let's be those who take that in our control and help to shape what we can, to be that voice, to be prepared to share in a moment's notice, in 60 seconds or less, the impact of the work that we're having, because we never know who we will have the opportunity to share in front of. That may be personally, individually, publicly. It may be through our newsletter or social media. We never know who's going to come across the communication, the marketing that we're putting out there into this world. It may be the very person who controls the funding that we operate through. And so take control of the future, take control of the narrative, and be intentional and be solution oriented in how you share that story. And with that being said, that concludes today's winter webinar series. I want to thank all of you for joining us. We do want to take a moment for any questions or any comments that you may have related to today's session. But before we do that, I want to, as I promised at the beginning, that we would have a grand prize raffle giveaway. And so I want to reintroduce Ryan Rand, who has had her hand on the wheel and has the names and is going to announce our winners of today's raffle.
Hello, everybody. We have put our attendance list into a raffle wheel, and I just moments ago spun that wheel for our two winners. Our two winners are Connie Carlson and Donna Rowe. So congratulations, big round of applause. I will reach out to you both individually through email to get a shipping address for you for your prize. So thank you for attending and congratulations.
Thank you, Ryan, and congratulations to all of our winners. And as Ryan said, we will be sending that to you. So we look forward to that. One thing that we want to capture from today's session is your feedback. We want to hear how we did. We want to hear your feedback on how you enjoyed, or any feedback on the content from today's presentation. And we have this QR code that's on the screen. You can use that on your phone. We will also be sending a follow-up email to all of those who attended today's session with the survey link as well. So again, we appreciate the feedback. We help to tailor the message and what we share in this winter webinar series based on the feedback. So be sure to follow through with that link and share with us your thoughts. Lastly, we want to hear from you, and we also want to connect with you. And so if you felt like today's insights were practical, informative, we would like to offer the opportunity for you to have a no-cost discovery session. And these discovery sessions are designed to help you in your organization, for you to share some of your current goals, challenges, priorities. Also explore how today's topic might apply to your unique context. Maybe this is an area that your organization is looking to scale up or to improve. We'd like to discuss, even from our experiences or based on today's conversation, any additional insights. Now, again, in this time frame over the last hour, we had a chance to give you an overview of this topic and some of the things that we've done to help amplify our communications and marketing efforts. But we could have a more intentional conversation. And so we would like to do that, again, what we're calling a no-cost discovery session. And we want to listen, we want to engage, and be able to provide support in that way. And so if you're interested in that, you can, again, scan the QR code that's on the screen here and fill out the form, and then our team will get in touch with you about scheduling that no-cost discovery solution. And again, my contact information is here on the screen as well. And so this is another separate QR code if you would like to just learn more about KRA as an organization. So my communication my contact information is here, as well as my colleague, Patrick Boxall, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at KRA. His contact information is here as well. Connect with us. We will also be at some of the upcoming workforce conferences, SETA in Orlando coming up in March. We will also be at NOB coming up at the end of March in Las Vegas. And then we have NODUP and CWA coming up here for those in California here in the spring. And so we're very active in the community and at workforce conferences. And so we look forward to hopefully engaging and connecting with you in person, either virtually through a discovery session or in person at one of the upcoming conferences. With that being said, before we close out finally, I do want to leave a moment. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also raise your hand for those of you that are remaining. If you have any questions or comments about today's topic and the material that we discussed, feel free to chime in the chat, raise your hand, and we will open up the floor for any questions. And while we're waiting on that, I want to thank my colleague Carlos for presenting with me and partnering today. It was great to partner with him on today's topic. As I said earlier, it's easy to talk about something that you do on a daily basis, and someone who is passionate, equally as passionate as you are about a topic. And so thank you, Carlos, for partnering with me on today's topic.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's an honor.
All right. And I want to thank all of you for joining us as well. I want to thank Ryan for, I would say, the producer who's helped us produce and organize all of the registration, the communication, and really the coordination behind the scenes and in front of the scene for this entire winter webinar series. All of our presenters. Ryan was a presenter throughout this winter webinar series. Patrick Boxall, my colleague earlier, who you saw, Calandria Thompson, our Director of People and Culture, and Zaskia Ruiz, who's the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of KRA, overseeing our communications team, overseeing all of our administrative departments within KRA, who was also a presenter. Also, Thomas Thornton, who was, I believe, on the call as well today, who presented with me back in December on the topic of business services. Jasmine Montez, who's also part of our Rancho Dominguez office in Los Angeles, who was also a presenter. So to all of our presenters, all of you who joined us throughout this winter webinar series. I know some of you joined for all 5 sessions. And if you did join for all 5 sessions, chime in on the chat, your experience, your thoughts. If that was you, put your hand up. We want to thank you for being a part of this series. And we look forward to the next season offering a new series of topics for our next webinar session, and offering content that's valuable to you. So your feedback and the questionnaires will help shape our future webinar series. And we look forward to that as well, and look forward to the opportunities of connecting with you one-on-one. So again, that is a big thank you to everyone. Again, until next time, stay tuned, connect with us on our various communication channels, our newsletter. Follow us on YouTube, follow our podcast, follow us on LinkedIn to stay up to date with what we have up and coming in the next season and in the year ahead. All right, and there are no official questions. That is the official end of today's webinar, and you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.